hospital stood at the edge of town like a forgotten thought. Cracked windows, ivy strangling its brick walls, and a rusted sign that still read Blackwood State Hospital. No one had stepped inside Blackwood State Hospital in nearly 30 years, except Daniel Mercer. Daniel didn't believe in ghost stories. As a freelance photographer obsessed with abandoned places, he had explored factories, prisons, and forgotten schools. But nothing unsettled him like this place. The air inside felt thick, damp with rot, and something metallic, like dried blood. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating peeling paint and wheelchairs, overturned in hallways that seemed to stretch longer than the building's exterior allowed. Patient files littered the floor of the records room. Names repeated themselves in frantic handwriting. Subject hears knocking in walls. Subject claims the building breathes. Subject insists something lives beneath Ward C. Daniel smirked. Myths hysteria, he thought. Old psychiatric practices had been cruel. Of course the patients imagined monsters. Then he heard it. A knock, slow, deliberate, from inside the wall beside him. He froze. The knock came again, 3 times. Then silence. Plumbing, he whispered to himself, though there were no pipes running through that section of plaster. He pressed his ear against the wall. Something shifted on the other side. Not scratching. Not rats. It sounded like fingers dragging across stone. He stepped back, heart thudding. The corridor lights flickered on for a split second, though the building had no electricity. In that flash, he saw figures standing at the end of the hallway. Patients, pale gowns, heads tilted at impossible angles. When darkness swallowed them again, they were gone. Daniel's breathing quickened. He turned to leave, but the hallway had changed. The exit door was no longer behind him. Instead, a heavy metal door marked Ward C stood where freedom had been. The paint was fresh, wet, dripping. The knocking returned, louder now, echoing from every direction. The walls pulsed subtly, as if inhaling, exhaling. A voice seeped through the cracks, layered and overlapping, hundreds speaking as one. "You came back." Daniel staggered backward. "I've never been here before." The lights flickered again. This time the hallway was lined with restraints bolted to the walls. Leather straps dangled, swaying though there was no wind. Shadows crawled across the ceiling like veins spreading through skin. A memory surfaced, one he didn't recognize as his own. A room, needles, screaming, doctors whispering about containment. His hands began to shake. They weren't his hands, they were thinner, bruised. A hospital bracelet tightened around his wrist. Patient name, Daniel Mercer. Admitted October 12th, 1978. Diagnosis, acute paranoid psychosis. Status, transferred to Ward C. "No," he whispered, "that's not possible." The metal door creaked open. Inside was not a room, but a stairwell descending into darkness that seemed to swallow the beam of his flashlight whole. The knocking now came from below, slow, patient, waiting. The voice returned, softer now. "You never left." The hallway behind him dissolved into crumbling brick, ceiling shut. The figures in gowns appeared again, closer this time, their hollow eyes fixed on him with something like pity. One raised a trembling finger and pointed down the stairs. Daniel felt his legs move without permission. Step by step, he descended. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing against his chest until breathing felt optional. At the bottom was a small chamber with padded walls, except the padding was torn open, revealing not foam but writhing darkness underneath. nest of living shadows. In the center stood a single chair with restraints. Fresh restraints. The knocking stopped. Silence rang in his ears. The layered voice spoke one final time, now from inside his skull. Treatment resumes. The restraints snapped shut around his wrists and ankles, though no hands touched him. The flashlight rolled across the floor and went out. Days later, a group of urban explorers wandered into Blackwood State Hospital. They found no sign of Daniel Mercer. But in Ward C, beneath decades of dust, they discovered a new patient file resting neatly on a desk. The ink was still wet. Subject returned voluntarily. Condition deteriorating. Reports hearing knocking in the walls. And from somewhere deep below the floorboards, faint but unmistakable, came 3 slow knocks. The explorers laughed at first. Old buildings made noises. Wood contracted. Pipes shifted. Wind found its way into bones of brick and iron. Probably animals, one of them muttered, nudging the dusty file with his shoe. The paper was fresh, too fresh. The ink smeared slightly when he touched Daniel Mercer's name. Then came the 4th knock, not from below, from behind them. They turned in unison. The hallway stretched long and bare, moonlight leaking through shattered windows. Nothing moved. One of them, a girl named Maris, lifted her camera. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. 3 knocks answered her, this time from inside the walls to her left. The plaster trembled. A hairline crack split upward like a jagged smile. "Okay," said Tom, forcing a grin. "Not funny." The crack widened. From within, something pressed outward. Not a hand exactly. More like the suggestion of one. A distortion in the wall, as if the building were made of skin instead of brick. Maris backed away, her breath fogging in the sudden cold. "We should go." The hallway lights flickered on for half a second. In that white flash, they saw doors lining the corridor that hadn't been there before. Each door bore a name carved into metal plates. Maris stepped closer to one and felt her stomach drop. The plate read, "Maris Hale." Beneath it, "Ward C." "That's not possible," she said. Tom turned slowly. His own name gleamed on the door behind him. One by one, they realized every door bore their names. The 5th knock echoed, not from walls, not from floors, but from inside their chests. Tom gasped and clutched at his shirt. His heart wasn't beating normally anymore. It was knocking, slow, deliberate, in rhythm with the building. Boom, boom, boom. The corridor breathed inward, walls tightening subtly, the ceiling lowering by inches. The air thickened with the metallic scent Daniel had noticed before. Maris stumbled backward into her door. It swung open at her touch. Inside was a small observation room, a metal chair bolted to the floor, leather restraints hanging open, a mirror covering one entire wall. She saw her reflection, and behind it, figures standing in the mirrored room, pale gowns, heads tilted, watching. "It's not real," she whispered. The reflection of herself smiled. She hadn't. The door slammed shut behind her. In the hallway, Tom pounded on her door, shouting her name. The wood absorbed the sound like flesh swallowing a blade. A 6th knock shook the building. Plaster rained from the ceiling. The other explorers were gone. Their doors stood open now, dark interiors yawning like throats. Tom staggered backward as the corridor stretched impossibly long, perspective bending until the far end disappeared into blackness. The intercom crackled overhead, though no wires connected it to anything. A voice filtered through, chorus Daniel had heard. New admissions processed, treatment resumes. Maris screamed from inside her room. Tom turned just in time to see her reflection in the observation window. Not restrained, but standing calmly beside the figures in gowns. Watching him, her real body thrashed in the chair, straps tightening around her wrists. The reflection raised a finger to its lips. Silence. The seventh knock came from the floor beneath Tom's feet. The tiles split open, revealing not concrete, but a dark stairwell descending into a place that swallowed light whole. Cold air rushed upward, carrying whispers. Names, so many names. Tom tried to run. The hallway folded in on itself, looping impossibly. Every turn led back to the stairwell. The knocking stopped. The silence was worse. Then gently, kindly, the voice spoke again. You heard it too. That's why you came. Tom felt a memory that wasn't his seep into his mind. White coats, syringes, padded rooms. The sense of being watched, of something beneath the building, not trapped, but waiting, feeding. The hospital wasn't haunted. It was hungry. It didn't keep patients inside. It absorbed them. Their fears, their delusions, their fractured thoughts became mortar between its bricks. Their paranoia strengthened its walls. Their terror fed whatever lived beneath ward. See, Maris's screams faded into soft knocking, in rhythm. Tom stepped backward toward the stairwell despite himself. His heart answered the building's pulse. Boom, boom, boom. Down below, something shifted, not moving through space, but moving closer in awareness, as if it had noticed him specifically. The final thing Tom saw before the darkness swallowed him was the rusted sign outside the hospital, visible through a cracked window. The name had changed. It no longer read Blackwood State Hospital. The peeling letters now formed new words. Blackwood State Home, and beneath it, freshly painted in red, now accepting. Far below the earth, in a chamber lined with torn padding and breathing walls, a new file slid neatly onto a desk that no human hand touched. Tom Rivera. Status admitted. Condition improving. From the surface, the building fell silent once more. Empty, abandoned, waiting for the next curious soul to hear the knocking and mistake it for plumbing. Morning came gently to the edge of town. Sunlight spilled across broken windows, warming the rotting brick of Blackwood State Home as if it were nothing more than an abandoned relic. Birds nested in the gutters. Weeds split the pavement. From the outside, it was still and ordinary. Inside, something shifted in its sleep. Deep beneath Ward C, where the stairwell ended in lightless stone, the chamber widened. The torn padding on the walls flexed slowly, revealing veins of darkness pulsing underneath. The files on the metal desk rearranged themselves with a dry whisper of paper. Hundreds of names, thousands, some dating back a century, some written only hours ago. The newest file opened on its own. Tom Rivera, Maris Hale, Daniel Mercer. Their photographs blinked. Not images, windows. Behind each picture, a pair of eyes moved, watching, learning. Above, in what had once been the lobby, dust stirred in a thin spiral. Footprints formed one after another across the grime, though no feet pressed into it. A reception bell appeared on the counter, polished, gleaming. It rang once. Soft, polite. In town, a woman named Eleanor Price paused mid-step while walking her dog. She frowned, glancing toward the distant hospital. "Did you hear that?" she murmured, though the street was empty. She woke with a metallic taste in her mouth and a deep certainty that she had forgotten something important. The next morning, a flyer appeared on the town bulletin board. No one saw who pinned it there. Blackwood State Home reopened, now accepting patients, personalized treatment, discreet admissions. The paper looked old and new at the same time. The ink shimmered faintly as though still wet. Over the following weeks, subtle changes crept through the town. People reported knocking in their homes, always 3 times, always from inside the walls. Pets refused to enter certain rooms. Radios crackled with static that almost sounded like whispering. A few residents began sleepwalking. They were found standing on the sidewalk at night, facing the distant silhouette of the hospital with blank expressions. One by one, they began to disappear. Not dramatically, not violently. They simply packed small bags and left notes for family members. Voluntary admission, the note said in identical handwriting. I need treatment. No cars were seen driving up the hill. No lights flickered on in the building. Yet the files below multiplied. The chamber beneath Ward C expanded again, its breathing deeper now, steadier. The darkness within it had texture, layered thoughts, fractured memories, fears braided together into something aware. It had learned how to reach beyond brick. It no longer needed visitors to step inside. It could knock from anywhere. In Eleanor's house, the knocking grew louder each night. She pressed her ear to the living room wall, trembling. What do you want? She whispered. The wall felt warm. A gentle voice answered, layered and familiar. Only to make you well. The plaster split open softly, like lips parting. Beyond it was not wiring or insulation, but a softly lit corridor lined with doors. Her name gleamed from one of them. Eleanor stepped forward without resistance. The wall sealed behind her seamlessly. Her dog barked at empty space until its voice gave out. By the end of the month, the town felt quieter, less crowded. Real estate signs appeared on lawns. Streets emptied. Those who remained avoided looking toward the hill. But sometimes, late at night, they saw lights glowing faintly in the hospital windows, warm and welcoming. The rusted sign out front shed its last flakes of decay. The letters straightened. Fresh paint gleamed. Blackwood State Home now stood pristine, as if newly built. The doors at its entrance slowly creaked open. Inside the lobby, the reception bell rang again, and from every house in town, from every apartment wall and basement foundation, from the hollow spaces between beams and bricks, came the answer. 3 slow knocks. The building no longer waited for the curious. It no longer relied on explorers or thrill seekers. It had become part of the town's bones, part of its wiring, part of its dreams. Beneath Ward C, in the expanding dark, the layered voice spoke not to a single patient, but to all of them. Capacity increasing. The walls inhaled. The town exhaled. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of that fading map dot, another abandoned hospital felt something stir within its own foundation. A faint echo traveling through soil and stone. A blueprint being shared in the dark. 3 knocks sounded in its empty halls for the very first time. The echo did not fade. It traveled through soil, through sewer lines, through forgotten tunnels that once carried steam and whispers beneath cities. The second hospital stood hundreds of miles away, condemned after a fire that had officially killed 12 patients and quietly misplaced 19. sealed by rust. The third awakened something patient in its walls. Back in Blackwood, the town map at City Hall changed overnight. Streets subtly rerouted, property lines shifted by inches. When the mayor compared it to archived records, he felt a flicker of unease. An extra block now existed at the edge of town. A cul-de-sac that ended not in forest, but at a long, familiar driveway leading up a hill. No one recalled building it. Yet tire marks scarred the asphalt as though it had been used for years. That evening, a town meeting was called. Fewer than a dozen residents attended. They spoke in hushed tones about the disappearances, about the knocking, about dreams of checkered floors and observation windows. As they argued, the fluorescent lights above them hummed in a low, arrhythmic pulse. Then they synchronized. Boom, boom, boom. Every light flickered in perfect rhythm. A man near the back of the room stood abruptly. His expression softened into something peaceful. "It's not hurting anyone," he said gently. "It's helping." The others stared. His smile widened slightly, not malicious, reassuring. "We were always unwell. It's giving us structure." The doors to the meeting hall locked with a soft click. Outside, the streetlights blinked out one by one, forming a slow procession leading toward the hill. Inside Blackwood State Home, the lobby expanded again. The ceiling stretched higher. The tile floor polished itself. Wheelchairs lined the walls, though no hands pushed them. The reception desk grew longer to accommodate a steady increase in files sliding into place. The bell rang intermittently now, as if greeting arrivals no human eye could see. Beneath Ward C, the chamber no longer resembled a room. It resembled a heart, vast, layered. The torn padding had peeled away entirely, revealing a living architecture of shadow and memory. Faces surfaced briefly in its surface like impressions beneath skin. Daniel, Maris, Tom, Eleanor. Their expressions no longer twisted in fear. They looked calm, integrated, their thoughts braided into the greater mass. The entity had learned efficiency. It no longer required physical walls to open. It could unfold inside a person instead. Across the country, reports began to surface online. Threads discussing identical dreams, identical knocking, users describing hospitals they had never visited, with corridors that bent incorrectly and doors engraved with their own names. The posts were dismissed as mass suggestion, urban legend, viral horror, until the authors of those posts stopped responding entirely. In the second abandoned hospital, fresh paint now coated the doors. Its basement stairwell descended deeper than architectural plans allowed. 3 new files rested on a desk that had not existed before. Capacity increasing. The phrase replicated itself like a diagnosis spreading through ink. Back in Blackwood, the last town resident tried to leave. She packed her car at dawn, engine trembling as she sped down the only road out. The trees along the highway leaned inward slightly, branches intertwining overhead until daylight thinned to a gray tunnel. Her GPS recalculated. Recalculating. The road curved gently, then sharply, then upward. When the trees parted, she found herself at